Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Smolsky, joined back in the swing of things, the weekly podcasts by my guy, Nick Pollock. Nick, how you doing?
What is happening? Yeah, it's 2025. Oh boy, I'm not traveling for another 6 months now.
Nice.
So I'm excited. It's a new year. We're going to be starting all of the live streams on playback.tv/pitcherlist this week. And I'm going to be going over every single team's rotation as we gear up for Pitcher List 11 on February 11th. Yay.
For those of you who didn't listen when you dropped those as podcasts last year, super helpful. They're also short. I mean, who knows what you'll do this year? But they were 15 minutes last year.
Yeah, that's the idea.
And I found on a commute, I could, listen to a couple teams on the way there, a couple teams on the way back, and had a good sense of the whole landscape a little bit. And it's just nice to not always think, even though we are going to discuss ADP today, it's nice to think globally sometimes and just who are the arms? What do they do well? What is the team context? And then I can combine that with all the nitty gritty ADP, this or that, whatever. I just want to know what the pitchers are like.
And I'm happy you said that because it's funny. I think this actually nails down a reason for me to having a disconnect, I think, with a lot of people talking about guys, because the foundation for me is separate from ADP, and it's internally in the pitchers on their teams and kind of classifying who they are independently from that. And then other people come at it from ADP. So if you see a guy around 300, well, he can't really be that good or not, right? And this is why I start freaking out and go, what? Why is this guy past ADP 300? That's crazy. He's supposed to be much better than that. So yeah, those podcasts are really fun. It's really good for you to set that foundation, understand these pitchers before the season starts, and then you can see what changes are being made or if they're being exactly the guy we expected. Because remember, y'all, there are 6 months in a season, and who knows if they're going to be doing great in April or if they're going to be doing great in August. Okay. So just because they do well in April does not mean that they're suddenly changed. And those podcasts really help you understand that foundation to know if they've changed and if it's real. So yay. I'm back to talking a lot, Eric. Can't wait.
Let's do it. I mean, you love it. You love it. And we are back to talking a lot about starting pitchers. Again, as always, we're going to focus a little bit on the middle round starters today. If you didn't listen to our episode last week, we kind of broke down the early ADP and just thoughts on where guys were going, acknowledging that this ADP, and we'll acknowledge it again here, this ADP is mainly for draft and hold formats right now, which are formats where you can't make any waiver ads during the year. So you tend to see quote unquote safer starting pitchers go earlier, guys who are on better team context, things like that, since you can't really find those waiver wire gems. But we're going to break down guys who are going in the middle and some late rounds, but these are guys all going after the top 160 picks in current ADP, which I believe we did from December 16th on was when this document
December 16th. That's correct.
Yeah. So we're going to throw up some debates. We're just going to talk about some of these guys. Maybe you and I will like the same player. Maybe we'll like both players. Maybe we'll dislike both players. Who knows? We're going to focus a little bit on where they're going ADP right now, but it's mainly just the pitcher and our confidence in that pitcher and whether we believe in them having some relative success in 2025. We tried to group them in ways that make some sense. And so we're starting off with a pair of high strikeout left-handed pitchers with some command issues throughout their career. One of them signed a free agent contract. It's Yusei Kikuchi, who is now with the Los Angeles Angels. And the next one going right after him in ADP. These guys are basically pick 162, 164. It's Robbie Ray, back with San Francisco Giants. Robbie Ray obviously returned in the middle of last year from Tommy John, looked pretty good in some starts, not so good in other starts, and then had a hamstring strain that sidelined him. But again, that's obviously not arm related, so he should be fully healthy heading into 2025. What is your initial take on these two? I think I have a pretty strong preference here.
Do you? I mean, I think for me, it's Robbie Ray. And that's because the fastball still gets a lot of vert. The slider is still vicious. I would love to see if his changeup can actually become a thing because I don't know, he might be a little bit more. Lefties need a changeup essentially in the majors to be absurdly good and consistent. Look at Tarek Skubal, look at Cole Reagans, etc. And yeah, I wish it wasn't the curveball that was the number 3 pitch. And yes, I know against righties last year, super high swing strike rate, 99th percentile, 27% swing strike rate, which is very good. And of course, a 23% on the slider. It's just that the four-seamer, I don't buy that it's going to have a 28% ICR again. And that was a very small sample what we saw last year in just 7 games and 31 innings or so. But the way I see it with Robbie Ray is I think he's just generally more consistent than Yusei Kikuchi.
Mhm.
And with Kikuchi, that was a whole journey through the entire year. And I love that four-seamer for him. I love that he's thrown it more in the top half. And I think it's a much better offering than it has been in previous years. But his slider wasn't always there. He tinkered a lot with this changeup, and the curveball honestly should come back a bit. It was just an up and down season the entire way. And I think as a fantasy manager, you're going to feel more consistent or feel more attached to Robbie Ray and feel, hey, look, I know I'm generally going to get, sure, he's going to have his blowups and everything, but he's not going to be a guy that you drop, I think, through the year. While Yusei Kikuchi certainly showcased that last year, and it's going to be a little bit more tumultuous. While, of course, I do recognize that if Kikuchi just kind of locks in and stays there, that'd be great. But I think it's a better chance for Robbie Ray to be productive this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the team contexts matter for me. I think the Giants are going to be a much better team than the Angels. I also, we talked about how Yusei Kikuchi relied, not crazy amount, but like, listen, the Astros didn't reinvent the wheel when they switched his pitch mix a little bit. It was things that he had done at times in Toronto as well. I just don't buy the Angels as an organization that saw something in what he was doing and can like really get the most out of it.
That's right.
And so I'm kind of treating Yusei Kikuchi like I treated him back when he was on the Blue Jays before the hot start of the second half last year. So I just trust Robbie Ray a little bit more. Also, Robbie Ray's command issues last year, they're not surprising for a guy coming off of Tommy John, right? Like they're not
also being Robbie Ray,
but also like we know that command is one of the last things to come back. So I feel better about his command a little bit in 2025. The strikeout rate was there, the swinging strikes were there, the ICR, even though which is ideal contact rate, which is a great pitcherless stat for people that don't really know it, which includes not just like barrels, right, but hard ground balls, things like that. So it's all kinds of hard contact.
So I'm seeing, by the way, I don't normally do this. Uncle Ted, who always shows up on our live streams here on YouTube. If you don't know this, just subscribe to the YouTube channel. And we have an On the Corner one just for this podcast. And of course, the massive picture list that houses all of our media is there too. And Uncle Ted, good to see you again. Angels want to turn Kikuchi back into a curved fastball instead of the slider heavy guy he was in Houston. I don't know the source of that. I would be absolutely shocked if that was true because no, there's no way that can't be it because the slider is so much better than the curveball. But if they do that, I mean, that's just to your point, Eric. That's I don't trust the Angels to help fix Kikuchi when there's inevitable trouble, right? That's a huge part about an organization is when there are things to fix. That's where the strength of the organization shows up. And the Angels have shown repeatedly that they are not that kind of crew. I didn't say it was right, said Uncle Ted. Okay. Thanks.
I'd be surprised.
I
would be surprised if the Angels saw what he did and changed him away from that. I'm not saying that I think they're not a great pitching development organization. I don't know that they would actively go against something that the pitcher was already doing that worked. I just don't know that they're going to bring out the most consistency from him. But just to wrap up the Robbie Ray point, what I was saying is like the CSW was around the career norms. The ICR was around the career norms. The swinging strike rate was good. The strikeout rate was good. So like, even if those things don't, like, he's obviously not going to post a 33% strikeout rate. Well, not obviously, but he's probably not going to. But even if those things don't carry over, what we saw in a small sample size was the things that Robbie Ray was good at. He still remains good at them. and the command issues were still there, but we know that is going to be there coming off of Tommy John. He's pitching in a good ballpark for pitchers on a decent team. I mean, we don't know. Obviously, the offseason isn't done, so we don't know who the Giants are fully, but they'll be a better team than the Angels, in my opinion. And so for me, I just trust Robbie Ray a little bit more. There are guys we're going to talk about later on in this episode that I think I would take over both of them, who are currently going later, including the next duo. I think I would take both of the pitchers in the next duo.
I think I would too.
These two guys. And I guess we just jump right into that.
Of course.
We're talking teammates here. We're talking teammates on the Tampa Bay Rays. We've got Ryan Pepio going with an ADP of around 175, and Shane Baz with an ADP of 180. And this is interesting as a duo. Not only are they teammates, but these are both guys who we kind of like trusted the Rays to get the most out of them, and they both delivered and didn't last year. Like was like Ryan Pepio, elevated fastball is going to take him to the next level. We saw the elevated fastballs. We saw that was really good for him, but the whole package didn't really come together.
Sure.
Shane Baz, it was like, hey, you were like filthy before getting hurt. Let's get back to that level. The slider wasn't really there, but he actually got progressively better as the year went on. So it was like, okay, maybe you're not the same guy you were in 2022 based on like all your pitch shape and your pitch dynamics, but like maybe you could still be a pretty good starting pitcher. And obviously he's still young. I take both of these guys over Kikuchi and Ray. And I say this acknowledging that we have to really recalibrate how we treat Tampa Bay arms this year, because they are going to be pitching outdoors in a minor league ballpark in the heat of Florida in the middle of the summer. And the humidity out there, like the ball is going to fly out of that park.
Right.
Not in the way it did in Tropicana. So we just you have to take that into consideration, that it is not going to be a really pitcher friendly environment in July and August for the Tampa guys.
Yeah. So, the IVB is also going to be different for these guys too.
True.
Because it's not the Trop. The Trop added an inch and a half of vertical movement, at least to our readings, for all four seamers last year. And on the other side of it, it was -3 in cores, which is pretty hilarious. It was also +1, I think, in Minute Maid Park. I'm sorry, what is it? It's Dakin. What is it now?
Is that the
Dakin? No. It's Dakin.
Is
Dakin Park.
Oh
yeah.
New Minute
Now,
Maid? Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable. And that's like an air conditioner appliance and whatever. That is the new park in Houston, and that also added an extra inch of induced vertical break. So keep that in mind with the guys like Pepio and Baz, who certainly have relied on it in the past. But what I was just looking at was reminding myself of Shane Baz and two factors: the four-seamer losing a little bit of vert that it had from the past. It went down to about 16 to 17 as opposed to like the 17 to 18 that it used to have. Same extension though, velocity a little bit down from like 97 that first year, then like 96 when he was a little bit worse in 2022, and then 95, 96 last year. But really the big difference for Baz is what you mentioned, like the slider being gone. The thing is, he adapted the curveball, and the curveball was really effective.
Yes, that's what led to that strong stretch to end
exactly. And I love that, because I think this curveball is here to stay. He was using it against lefties. He stopped using the slider at all against lefties and just used the curveball instead. And it was much better, and it was great. And I see that for Baz. I see four-seamer looking good. I see curveball looking good. I see slider getting better again, right? It seems weird to me that the slider just disappeared. He just lost the feel for it. And now I think this offseason, I would hope that he's been working on getting that slider back. Pepio's side, it's really hard, because I think the ceiling for Pepio is a little higher. I think he has a more well-rounded arsenal. I think his four-seamer's shape is a little bit better than Baz's. But I don't trust his command as well as Baz. Sure. And so in these situations in the past, I've said I lean with the command, and I'm going to do that again. I don't think you're going to be in a situation this year that you want to drop Shane Baz. If you look at this past year, Ryan Pepio was dropped in leagues. I picked him up in 2 leagues actually. I don't think they should have dropped him. Nonetheless, they were dropped, and they dropped Pepio. So I think you're safer with Boz, and I think you're going to be happy with it. If you really feel like you need to go for a potential 30% strikeout arm, it's Pepio, who has a four-seamer he pounds in the zone, a slider that misses bats, a changeup that was a grade 80 while he was coming up. Initially lost the command of it and then found it with the Rays last year. Is utilizing that four-seamer well upstairs with intent. It's just about getting that feel for the slider and the changeup. So either way, I like these guys better, like you said, than Kikuchi and Ray because they both have the similar strikeout rate. I would say Pepe is slightly more than Boz at the moment because I think Boz needs to find the slider. At least we need to see that being what it used to be, or at least the four-seamer also dominating the way that it used to. You know, it calls him the destroyer of worlds when he's on Shane Boz, but doesn't have that right now without the slider working. No. So I want you to really iterate one more time. Like, is it Boz for you still, or is it Pepio?
I think it's Boz for me still. And that could be just like bias, right? Like I was really big on Shane Boz years ago, and I'm maybe not ready to fully give up on the pitcher I think he could be, since obviously he didn't pitch a full MLB season last year. So I think there's reason to believe he's working through some things, and we saw him get better. And so there's further improvement to make. And so, yeah, I think I lean for Shane Boz. I need to dig in a little bit more, acknowledging I need to dig in a little bit more into like the contact profiles and see who might be impacted a little bit more by that park shift. And it wouldn't be like a major deciding factor for me, but like, you know, a little bit of a deciding factor. Because they are like, I had them back to back in the rankings we did, you know, at the end of the season. And so they are really close to, for me. So it is going to be like picking nits to choose between the two of them. We should acknowledge, if you're kind of like just tuning into baseball news now that it's the new year or the football regular season is over or whatever, Jeffrey Springs is no longer on Tampa Bay. And so these guys are both locked into the rotation. Like there's not a competition for spots. There's not one of these guys isn't now going to be bumped.
I'm trying to remember this. I got 4 in my head.
It's McClanahan
and Bradley,
Rasmussen.
Oh, well, Rasmussen, is he confirmed to be fighting for that? And
I kind of think with the trade of Springs, yes, because it's Rasmussen. It's McClanahan. It's these two guys, Boz and Pepio. You obviously, you know, we'll talk about Taj Bradley. He's going to come up later in the show. But Taj Bradley is there. And then you have Zach Littell and you have Drew Rasmussen. And so those are the 6. And I guess Rasmussen could be in the pen. I also like, you know, again, I don't want to spoil our Taj Bradley conversation. I don't think it's a lock that Taj Bradley pitches his way into the rotation. If Rasmussen looks good and if Littell looks good, it's likely, but I don't think it's a lock. Yeah, sure. And again, Littell and Rasmussen have both been relievers in the past. So it's not like, oh, Rasmussen is the reliever and Littell is not. Like both of those guys could be long relief guys. And so 2 of those 3 guys will get the final spot, or because, you know, Baz's injury history, McClanahan's coming off, you know, Tommy John, it might be all 6 guys.
Right.
You know, we'll see how Tampa wants.
Yeah, they might. Right, they might do that 6-man. Ease the rotation a little bit. I'm with you that Rasmussen should be the guy. Everyone says, no, he only pitched this amount last year. I think they were just being careful. Yeah. And Littell, man, I know it's going to surprise some people. There was a conversation after the first month about Cole Reagans versus Zach Littell inside of one of my Reddit posts. And I bit my tongue. I was as nice as I possibly could. And I see why Littell, he was looking well at the moment, but that is not the future of the Rays. No. I think this
is where you like take spring training starts for granted, or with a grain of salt. Is like there was a spring training start Littell made against the Braves where he struck out Acuna, Albies, and Matt Olson back to back on high fastballs, and I was like, Are you gonna do that? Like, I know who you are, right? But like, if you're blowing fastballs up in the zone by like 3 of the best hitters in the NL, like, is that a thing? And obviously, like, you know, Littell had his moments, But that's where, like, even something you see with your eyes in spring training, you have to be like, all right, I'm not fully going to react to this because who really knows?
Every pitcher is a pitcher in the majors because of something.
Yes.
There's a reason why they are there. And if they show that reason, then they'll strike at anybody.
And listen, I got to say, like, it would not surprise me. I'm just going to throw a name out there. We're talking about the Rays. But a couple years ago, Mike Vassell was a really interesting starting pitcher in the Mets minor league system, and he never quite developed in the way that people thought. The Rays picked him in the Rule 5 draft.
Oh, did they?
He has to be on the major league roster. It's likely he's going to start the year in the bullpen, but we have seen the Rays take guys who are bullpen guys and turn them into good starters. And this is a guy who was a good minor league starter for a while and then kind of stalled and stagnated. And so I don't think that, like, I'm not saying Mike Vassell is going to win the 5th rotation spot for the Rays out of the gate, but I'm just saying that's a name that I'm watching, because it would not surprise me if the Rays made him a usable starting pitcher, and if they could get rid of Zach Littell in a trade in June, or Rasmussen or one of those guys, and then they slot Vassell into the rotation at the end of the year, like, it would not surprise me.
That is such a pull, Eric. I love it.
We'll see.
I have no faith in Mike Vassell from my analysis of last year, and
no, he was bad. Like, that's
and it's going to take a lot for the Rays to do it. However, you're totally right. We've seen crazier things from the Rays in the past.
Would you have ever thought that Zach Littell was a
3-4 inning
starter
opener, like a T-Lex situation or something like that? Who knows? Yes. Oh man, fun stuff there. We've got other guys we got to talk about, don't we? Though
we do. We got other guys we got to talk about, in particular guys on the Tampa Bay Rays still, but we'll do that after this break.
Oh man, we're back, baby. Oh my gosh, we're doing podcasts again. We got so much content
and ad breaks. So we'll wrap up the Tampa Bay Rays rotation. I almost called them Braves. Tampa Bay Rays rotation by talking about the aforementioned Taj Bradley. We paired him with the starting pitcher going off the board right after him. High upside strikeout guys who have major command concerns. It's Taj Bradley, ADP 196. It's Luis Gil, ADP 198. I think that most people would say, how the heck is it not Luis Gil? Like, he is, he had a great year, but we talked about on the podcast, we saw some of those warts that were concerns about him going into the year. We saw them manifest again at the end of the year. And I don't think it was just fatigue. I think it was something that has always been a part of why he had quote unquote reliever risk when he was coming up through the minor leagues. Yeah. So I'm curious where you go here. I still think I go with Luis Gil because we've just continued to see Taj Bradley fail to capitalize on any sort of momentum or changes. I mean, we talked about Taj Bradley had that ridiculous 8-start stretch where he was going fastballs up in the zone and splitters low in the zone, and he looked
that was
phenomenal, but he just couldn't command the fastball consistently enough for that to maintain, and he got obliterated after that hot stretch. He was dropped in a lot of leagues despite the fact that he was so good for those 8 starts, because he was really, really bad down the stretch.
Yeah. So, okay. So I feel like both of these guys are your typical draft traps. And it's something I really am trying to emphasize this year, of not drafting hipsters. Okay. If you guys are unaware, this year I'm kind of refining the 4 terms, like the middle round guys. You have your aces at the top, you have your almost aces. Okay, fine. But I've been saying terms like Holly and Toby and Cherry Bomb and hipster. So I want you guys to understand this. If you are a Holly or a Cherry Bomb, that means you're not expected to be dropped. A Cherry Bomb is a premium starter who's going to be beneficial for you. You're just going to be really upset when those bombs happen. They're going to be more vicious and more volatile, but you're never going to really get to the point of dropping them. A Holly is someone that's a step up from a Toby who's reliable and good, but he's not really an ace. He's not going to be like a 26% strikeout guy. He's going to be like a 21, 23, that kind of thing. He's going to be like a 3.5, 3.6 ERA, 110, 115 whip. And that's great and you're happy, but that's not a stud ace. And it's also not someone you're going to drop. Now, a hipster is a lower tier of a cherry bomb. That is a headache-inducing pitcher stifling the entire roster. And the reason they're a headache is because they can be so good and so bad. And you don't know if they actually are someone that you should be holding on to or not throughout the year. And of course, Toby, you guys know Toby, super boring, does not strike out guys. And maybe he'll go 6 innings and get you that win, but like you don't like that he's there. He's probably gonna have like 4 ERA at the end of the year and like a 120, 125 whip, that kind of thing. So I'm looking at my drafts and I'm trying to select who are the ones that are going to drive me up the wall as a manager. Who are the ones that have the highest chance of being of not taking that leap that we want of consistency, the ones that are likely to repeat this undulating mess of good and bad and good and bad to the point that we don't see improvement that we can buy into. And I see Taj Bradley and Luis Seal as both of those guys. You know, I see Shane Baz and Ryan Pepe a little bit away from that, more towards on the cherry bomb side of like, hey, look, they're going to have some blips, but like, you know what's there. With Taj, I want to buy it. I really do. I remember last year when he had that 7-game stretch, I was like, I have to rank him highly because that's 7 or whatever games of him just doing so well. Even though I don't buy this, I have to, because there's no manager who's just going to drop him now. Like you can't. You have to roll with it above all these other ones that we don't really know about. But yeah, I think that we're going to have the same stuff from Taj Bradley because he's not a command guy. And we've seen that splitter go away and it's just not very good. Hopefully the cutter becomes a major, major thing. And that's consistent to some degree. But yeah, I don't want to roll the dice with Taj Bradley. As a manager, I want to be able to make good decisions or easy decisions. And that is not an easy one. And the same with Luis Seal. He's not a command guy. He kind of throws all around the zone, lost his changeup a lot the second half of last year. Fastball lost a lot of vert. Then all of a sudden in the last game of the season had like nearly 18 inches of vert instead of like 16 and change. It's kind of weird. But the slider picked up. That's nice. I believe in Heel more than Taj Bradley. I think it's a better situation with the Yankees. I think in his second season, I think there is a higher chance of things smoothing out a little bit and getting more feel. While Taj Bradley, I feel like we've seen this song and dance before, and there's no place to go really. I think expecting a leap for him is harder.
Agreed. And team contact's better for me with Heel. And it's important in your hipster discussion that the draft cost factors in, right? Like where you're drafting these guys. Like Luis Heel was not a hipster last year because you were just like, I'll take him with my last pick. We'll see if he wins a rotation spot. Like it wasn't an issue. And so, you can take these guys that give you headaches with your final pick because you don't actually have to have the headache. You just get rid of them.
Yeah. I do want to say though,
like third or fourth starter, you kind of have to keep having the headache for a little while.
Sorry to interrupt you, Eric. I do want to mention with that though, make sure at the end, if you have options that are flyers who could actually become stable ones, like a stable cherry bomb or a holly, right? I know it's weird for me saying that, but something that's more believable. Like, go after a guy that says, if he does this, then I'm in.
Right.
As opposed to, I don't know if this is going to work or not. Even if I see him do well, I won't be able
when
to
everybody was drafting Joe Boyle. Because they're like,
right. Well, I mean, with Joe Boyle, you could say, if I actually believe the command, he's going to throw strikes, then okay. But like, obviously it didn't happen. Right. But, a good example would be for Jared Jones wasn't the quality a question of skill. It was, if he is starting regularly for the Pirates, we're in. Right. And we don't feel like we would drop him at that point.
And that was the same thing for Luis Heel. If he wins the rotation spot, we're in.
Now we have a better idea of both of those. And with Heel, I think there's more susceptibility to that being more inconsistent and bad. Well, Jared Jones, I know he's slowed down too. Like every guy, by the way, in their first season does not just go 180 strong. Like they always fatigue as it goes on. That's called building up. You don't lift 300 pounds right away. Like you gotta space it out. So they always are better the next year when it comes to fatigue.
Yeah.
But just keep that in mind. Put yourself in positions where you can make quick decisions with those last picks.
We're going to move to two pitchers who were not in the rotation, or at least not in our heads, were not in the rotation to start 2025 with their respective teams and then ended in the rotation. But I do just want to quickly point out Caden's comment on YouTube where he said, keep sleeping on Tanner Bybee and Gavin Williams. We're not going to talk about those guys today, but Nick is has aggressively talked up Gavin Williams.
Look, this is the best year to get into Gavin Williams because he's like your last round pick, and if he's throwing a cutter and four-seamer out of the gate with confidence in the zone, like that's
so we are both going to be very in on Gavin Williams, especially at his current ADP. So nobody is sleeping.
I guarantee you it'll be like 200 or 190 by the end of it.
We both of us are like my toddler son because nobody is sleeping on Gavin Williams at all.
I love it.
But these next two pitchers, we've got Bowden Francis, was in the rotation for the Blue Jays, wasn't in the rotation, back in the rotation with that splitter that Nick loves so much in the second part of the season, now being drafted around ADP 236, and then ADP 238 is Ronel Blanco, who came out of nowhere for the Houston Astros last year, and will be in the rotation again at the start of 2025. Basically, I just lumped these guys together as guys who nobody really they weren't. I mean, Bowden Francis was a little bit on the radar heading into last year, but both these guys kind of came out of nowhere. Who were you actually believing will be a usable fantasy starter for 2025?
I have a question, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
What is Bowden Francis's best pitch?
Well, Nick, that's a problem because heading into the year, everybody thought it was the curveball, and then it wasn't the curveball, and then it became the splitter, but it wasn't really the splitter.
It was not the splitter.
And so nobody actually knows what his best pitch is because it seemed like he got better when he added the splitter, but the splitter itself wasn't really great. It was fine. And so it is a little bit of, that like Job from Arrested Development. It's like a little illusion. It's a little magic here.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's a trick, except it's not. And what is Ronel Blanco's best pitch?
Is it not still his changeup? It was his changeup for the longest time.
It was, but I would argue that it's a slider. It's just more of a consistent pitch. It's near 70% strike rate, near 20% swing strike rate. Like that was, especially down the stretch in the second half, it was like slider's going to do the stuff, and then fastball and changeup just void, please.
Which is interesting because the changeup, when he started the year, we were like, this guy is not going to last. And then you were like, oh my God, the changeup is elite. So he's had two separate pitches that have carried him at different points in the season, which is interesting.
Right. He had the slider in the beginning too. And then the changeup wasn't as reliable, but the slider still did everything. And I think that's really my point is Bowden Francis, that was so much smoke and mirrors to me. I can't express that enough. The four-seamer getting away with so much. It's not going to be able to carry him the same way. I just can't believe that. And yes, even though the splitter results weren't great, 21% CSW, sub 60% strike rate, 11% swing strike rate. It still was a nullifier, and it was in their heads, right, when the fastball was being served. But it's just so much clearer to me. Like, if you have Bowden Francis, I don't think you'll understand it if he does well in the beginning. I don't think it'll be convincing. Well, Ronel Blanco, you're going to know. You're going to very quickly understand, is this still a reliable Ronel Blanco or not? And then you move on, right? If it isn't, or you get a guy who's on a better ball club. I think the Astros should still win games. I know it sounds crazy, even though they're
I don't think
and Bregman and everything. They still got Jordan and Altuve, and they should be fine.
Christian Walker, and they'll be fine. And I think they've got some other moves.
Oh, right, they signed Christian Walker. Yeah. Oh, that's not fair.
They've got some other things in there as well.
I love Christian Walker so much.
Also, elite defense at first base. If you're just talking about,
and look, Ronel Blanco, I think he's going to still do well there. So this is a very, very easy Ronel Blanco to me.
Agreed.
I'm actually just so surprised that everyone just like says, "Yep, Bowden Francis," but we're not Reese Olson.
And I was in on Bowden Francis. Like I was drafting him a lot of places in my final picks last year. I obviously cut him, especially when he got demoted. Like I wasn't holding on to him all year. I added him back in a few places at the end. But yeah, even I can't draft him ahead of so many guys that are going after him right now, including like Bowden Francis going ahead of Gavin Williams and Walker Buehler and like all these guys who, we're not even going to talk about today, who to me are much better picks. I will say
Brandon Woodruff. Just take a chance on that.
Yes, exactly. Woodruff, Nestor Cortez, like there are guys that I would take over Bowden Francis. I will say just for Astros related news, we were talking about this before we started recording. Chandler Rome, who covers the Astros for The Athletic, reported today that it's a long shot that either Luis Garcia or Lance McCullers make it back for opening day. I know that Lance McCullers news shocks you that he's not coming back for opening day. Luis Garcia is going to be 21 months removed from his Tommy John surgery, but still won't be ready opening day, or is a long shot. What that just means is that the Ronel Blanco leash is a little bit longer than you might have expected, because Ronel Blanco isn't even their fifth starter right now. You could argue between him and Arrighetti, they're the 3 and the 4, and maybe Hayden Wesneski is the 5. So even if Luis Garcia comes back early, that's not bumping Ronel Blanco from the rotation. There's going to have to be somebody else. Framber, Hunter Brown. And then Arrighetti and Ronel Blanco.
That's easy. Those 4 are locked in.
And listen, they may make another move. We don't know. But as of right now, Ronel Blanco would withstand the return of Luis Garcia. He would need another move to even be on the precipice of losing his job.
Right. And that, I mean, I got to also mention, like, he was bound in Francis at like inside the top 70 starters, and at 99 is Ryan Nelson. And it's just, wait, why are you not caring about Ryan Nelson's run?
Please free Ryan Nelson. Free Ryan Nelson. Get him out of Arizona. Get him to a team. They're not going to pitch him. They're going to move him to the bullpen, Nick. Get him out.
Wait. Is that a report that they're going to put him? He's out of the rotation now because of Burns and Eduardo Rodriguez. And I mean, they want to get rid of him.
It's not an official report, but a lot of the beat writers have him 7th on the list because of contractual obligations and veterans and whatever. It's Corbin Burns, Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Eduardo Rodriguez, Jordan Montgomery, somebody. Who am I blanking on? Somebody, and then Ryan Nelson.
He was their best pitcher.
And so that was 6. Who is...
I mean, Ross Resource will answer it for us.
Oh, Brandon Pfaadt. Sorry.
Okay. Brandon
Pfaadt, then Ryan Nelson.
So, all right. So this is how I see it. 1, Jordan Montgomery's not going to be there, and there's no way they're actually going to do that over Ryan Nelson. They just can't do that.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
So that's 6. Right. Then something happens. Something happens.
Yeah.
And Ryan Nelson's back in the picture. I'm so shocked to myself that I didn't register the impact of Corbin Burns in this way, because I just remember the Arizona Diamondbacks last year just having no one.
Right.
And I was like, okay, he's not Ryan Nelson's still Ryan Nelson. But let's just say in a world, Ryan Nelson and Bowden Francis are both regularly starting for their teams.
Yes.
Who do you want?
Easy. It's not even I am in that
full Nelson
like that. It's that NFL draft thing of like, I run the ticket up to the top. I sprint with Ryan Nelson. I'm like, please. Oh my God, I can't believe this is a choice. I take Ryan Nelson.
All right. So just so we're on the same page, and guys, you're like, what did Ryan Nelson do? I completely checked out. Wasn't he so bad? His 4-seamer is a very good vert pitch. He throws it so confidently in the zone. It's better than Bowden Francis's. And he has secondaries that I think can be much better than they have been. The cutter showed a lot of life in the spring last year. And I think just even having the cutter and the slider in the zone with the fastball made that fastball so much better. I think that this is a matter of time for Ryan Nelson to figure out his real number 2 that takes that step forward and that complements that 4-seamer, because it just makes too much sense for me. Now, am I going to be drafting Ryan Nelson everywhere? Probably not. I'm not drafting Bowden Francis anywhere, but I could see him at the end of my draft if he's locked into that spot. I also try as much as I can, especially my 12-teamers in my 21st, 22nd, 23rd round. I try to avoid the 5th starter as much as I can. And I'm not saying that's like, oh, I don't draft Jared Jones. No, I drafted Jared Jones. I drafted Luis Gil, etc. But the reason for that is the opening weekend, you can make moves. And if you have a guy who's pitching in the first 3 games of a season, you can actually drop him for that number 5 starter you would have drafted instead. Right? You get this extra little bonus because they literally haven't pitched. And it's something you can take advantage of easily in the beginning of the season, the most important weekend of the season, really. So something to keep in mind. But I don't really think I'm going to be going after Ryan Nelson, my 12-teamers. Are you?
Not unless there's any sort of meaningful roster shakeup in Arizona.
Well, no, if he's the number 5.
If he's number 5, I think I would. Yeah. I mean, again, it would depend on where I would be very interested, and it would depend on where he was going in drafts. And so, yeah.
I mean, I'd probably, if Cody Bradford's inside that opening weekend, I'd rather have Cody Bradford, I think, than Ryan Nelson.
Yeah. Fair.
I mean, they're back to back inside this ADP. So I'm just
trying
to give an idea
I probably
of like where
would
I am with the line of it, you know?
I probably would as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
right. Let's keep going with this.
We're gonna go to one more kind of like not super exciting one, and then we'll end with the 3 ones that I think are a little more like upsidey and fun. So
sure.
The guy that everybody yelled at you for not ranking highly, Ranger Suarez, is going with an ADP of 265 right now.
Now they get it. Just kidding.
Reese Olson is going with an ADP of 299. At first blush, I understand. I think there is something to say about the security of Ranger Suarez.
Yeah.
Because we know who he is. And right
wins.
now, Ranger Suarez going 265 is totally fine value because we know he's going to produce solid stats, nothing eye-popping. He's locked into that rotation. It's a good team context. I think if this was a 15-team league, I'd be more inclined to take Ranger Suarez there because of that security. Reese Olson to me at 299 is just way more enticing. And I think had Reese Olson actually won some of the games in the start of the year when he was pitching elite and just could not get a win, I think, it was like absurd. I think we'd be viewing Reese Olson a lot differently because I don't think people realize just how good he was at the start of the year because there weren't wins attached to what he was doing. Reese Olson is a good pitcher on a team that we now know is good, right? This was not a fluky team that made the playoffs. Like, this is a good team with a good pitching staff. In a good home ballpark, much better than Ranger Suarez is. And so I just think there's more upside in Reese Olson, even if maybe there's more security in Ranger Suarez. But at this point where they're at an ADP, I'm taking Reese Olson.
Yeah, it's interesting because Ranger Suarez is a guy that when he's cooking with his changeup, he's got it. It's what he does. He does it for like 6 weeks at a time. And we've seen that start in August. We've seen that start in July. We saw it last year start in April. You don't know when it's going to start. It could be right out of the gate. He's also, as you mentioned, a safer bet for wins next year. It is more secure in everything. If I'm looking at the end of my draft and I'm looking at that opening weekend and you see, wait, hold on a second. Ranger Suarez is going third in that rotation. Yes, Luzardo, no. You're going fourth, buddy. It's Ranger Suarez third. Something like that. Maybe I'd consider it because maybe I can sneak in an early win, feel okay about this, see where he is in that changeup. Maybe he's in that hot stretch right then, and then roll with that. But if you want to talk about a guy who can break out of that mold of being a Toby for your team and actually consider being someone that you hold on to like a Holly as a top 40 guy for a whole year, that is Reese Olson. He has 2 secondaries that work really well, the slider and the changeup. Slider is a lot more consistent. His sinker is really good against right-handers. The question is, what does he do against left-handers? Because the sinker doesn't work and the four-seam doesn't really work against lefties. He needs to figure out one extra way to get those guys out. Those guys out. The changeup can be that, but generally you need one of a four-seamer, cutter, and sinker to lay the foundation. And he doesn't quite have that yet against lefties. But if that were to be fixed, Reese Olson could just be what you want Ranger Suarez to be. So I'm enticed by both. I would say in shallower leagues, I'd go after Reese Olson because I think there's a higher chance of him hitting that consistency. Yeah. And in deeper leagues, I would go after Ranger Suarez because you want that higher ceiling of a win each time he starts.
Yes. Speaking of higher ceiling, we have 3 pairings or groups coming up. We'll talk about some of the more higher ceiling potential fun late round draft picks, but we'll get to those after this break.
Hey, Uncle Ted. They have 3 lefties though, so they have to stack 2 lefties back to back unless you're splitting up Nola and Wheeler, which no one wants to do that. It's going to be Wheeler, Nola. No, let's go Ranger Suarez, Crystal Sanchez, Jesus Luzardo. I mean, are they going to split up Nola and Wheeler? No
but
way.
even if they did split up Nola and Wheeler, you have to go back to back at some point in time. It's just.
Yeah. Well, right. That's right. There's going to be 2, but I guess 3 in a row should be avoided.
But again, that will depend. I mean, I really do think you can mess around with your own schedule and your opponent's schedule, right? Like
Yeah.
depending on how many days you have off in a week or whatever.
It's interesting.
You know,
Well,
or if you need to bring in a 6 starter for a 7-game week, you could always,
there's the answer.
you could always do things like that.
Taiwan Walker, right?
Yeah, of course. Spencer Turnbull, right? That's who they're going.
It should have been.
I know.
Should have been Spencer.
All right, we'll dive in.
All right, wait, hold on. Wait for the light to fix on me because this is.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
We're going to begin our final 3 groupings of guys that I think are a little bit higher upside, a little bit more fun for your late round draft picks. We're going to start with a pair of high strikeout rate left-handed pitchers coming off of injury in pretty poor pitchers parks, who have not yet lived up to the expectations we had from them when they were minor leaguers. It's Nick Lodolo in Cincinnati with an ADP of 258, and it's Jesus Luzardo now in Philadelphia with an ADP of 310. Obviously, that is a pretty massive gap. That's about 50 plus picks in ADP. That could change in drafts coming up with Luzardo if people get a full understanding of his health. And so, yeah, I'm curious. Can you still not quit Nick Lodolo? Are you in on Luzardo? Like, if you had to pick between these two guys, were you planting your flag?
I'm going to go Luzardo for wins
Mm-hmm.
on the Phillies. So this is difficult. These are two guys I never know how to rank them because I actually genuinely believe they are going to be above a 25% strikeout rate. And I do think that a healthy Nick Lodolo for a full year does figure things out, get a little bit more consistent on the entire arsenal, refines that changeup a bit more, and becomes more like that Chris Sale type that we wanted to be. While Jesus Luzardo has horrific extension and his four-seamer gets hit far too hard, and then his slider and changeup just have too many mistakes over the plate and they get hit as well. But then when he's on with them, he's amazing. So, I mean, they're both prototypical hipsters. Yeah. And I'm actually a little surprised they are as low as they are because it's really hard to find guys hinting a 30% strikeout rate this deep in a draft. Normally, those are all gone by 250 at the latest. So if that's what you're looking for, circle these guys. I would say Jesus Luzardo is the better play because you could have wins attached to that pretty easily, like he did in Miami. And I routinely had him around 40%. Ranked in my 40s just because he was always a strikeout guy with like a 3.6 ERA or 3.6, like 3.9 or something like that. And yeah, you're going to have those terrible games of 600 runs or something like that, but you're going to get those brilliant 7 strikeouts, 1 walk, 1 earned run game as well from him. And I think you're going to get a little more consistently than Nick Lodolo. Health is obviously a big thing for both of them, but we're past 250. Throw health out the window. Right. Really does not matter. If they're healthy entering the season, then you just take whatever you can get, and you're probably going to drop most of these guys anyway. So, yeah, I would go Luzardo. How about you?
I would go Luzardo too. And there is a part of me that doesn't want to quit Lodolo because of what we saw from him in 2021 and what we saw from him, 2022 was his first year, and what we saw from him in the minors. But I don't like the ballpark. I don't love either ballpark, but I don't like the ballpark for Lodolo. I think the team context is better for Luzardo. I think that even though Luzardo has not morphed into what we thought he would be as a prospect, I think like penciling him in for a 3.6, 3.7 ERA, even with his move to a worse ballpark with solid strikeout rates and probably double-digit wins on that Phillies team feels pretty safe. And that's a pretty solid arm this late in drafts. It's not setting the world on fire, but it's pretty solid.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think I go for that. But again, like he's pitched more than 100 innings once in his entire career. Like neither one of these guys should be relied on for significant innings on your fantasy team.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what you're saying, not necessarily double-digit wins, but more of a higher than average win chance.
Sure. Yes.
Right, yes. Because obviously the volume is about the wins there.
Yes, if he'd pace for double-digit wins, if he was, going to finally pitch a full season, which
so I think it's just surprising to see both of them this low because I've seen a lot of people higher on Nick Lodolo. I think people are worried about the elbow thing with Luzardo. And of course, this ADP is including those draft and holds as well, which is taking health a little bit more drastically than I think we will in our drafts. But I am very curious to see where Luzardo does end up because Yeah, I would consider him more so at the end of my drafts than I would say Bowden Francis, something like that.
For sure. And I
Yeah.
just like will politely push back on Uncle Ted's last comment on YouTube, because I think this is the thing that people are still like saying, that believing that Jesus Luzardo has ace upside. I
Oh
just
yeah.
I don't think he does. I don't think he's that guy. And
Yeah.
that's still not bad, right? Like saying Jesus Luzardo is not an ace is not saying Jesus Luzardo is a bad pitcher. It's just saying for years we were waiting for Jesus Luzardo to make that jump to become the ace we thought he was going to be when he was coming up through the A's system. And he flashed a little bit early in Miami, but like I don't think he's an ace. I don't think he's an MLB ace. I don't think he's a fantasy ace. And that doesn't mean he's a bad pitcher. He could still be a really solid MLB pitcher and a really solid fantasy pitcher for you. But I think we just need to recalibrate expectations. And I just would not be drafting Jesus Luzardo thinking, hey, this guy might be an ace. I can't do that.
I think it's important to think of Luzardo kind of like Robbie Ray, in that Robbie Ray has had those ace seasons. And that was the high end of it. And I think that Luzardo is a step below that. I think his fastball is just too poor. I think he's not, he doesn't have that foundation of a fastball. And that means that he's going to have problems with when the secondaries aren't being as pristine as they need to be. And it's interesting because when Luzardo does locate the fastball, like, things are cool. It's just such a necessity. And yeah, don't think of him as an ace type. Think of him as a top 30 type, and then you'll be okay.
Yeah.
That's what you're going for.
All right. We got an interesting trio here of guys who are trying to pull a Michael King. Michael King, as you know, if you've listened to this podcast, Nick and I both have ranked inside of our top 10s right now. Big fans of what he was doing in San Diego. These are three relievers who are either reportedly going to be in the rotation or want to be in the rotation, but are currently free agents. It's Jeff Hoffman, who is currently going pick 291. It's Griffin Jax, who's currently going pick 295. And then Clay Holmes, who's the only one who is definitely going to get a shot at being in the rotation with the New York Mets now. And he is going 355. So I guess my two-part question to you is, do you think that any of these guys can actually pull a Michael King? And if you had to put your chips on one of them to be a usable fantasy starter next year, who do you believe it is?
So I think it is interesting with Jeff Hoffman that he's trying to get a signing somewhere as a starter. I don't think he actually will. Mm-hmm. Griffin Jax is interesting. I think there needs to be more movement in Minnesota for that really to happen. But I think he is certainly an interesting pitcher. It's not the greatest vert four-seamer, but the thing is, it's 15 to 16 inches of vert with a flat arm angle at 1.4, which is very good. And he goes up in the zone, and he throws it at 97. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of that four-seamer, and then it's a sweeper on top of that, which then destroys right-handers. And guess what? The changeup had a 28% swing strike rate last year. So I do like that about Griffin Jax. And if he actually does get the opportunity, I'm very much in there. I think I'm buying that one the most if the opportunity is there as a number 5. But what is the one that I actually believe in? I think actually Clay Holmes is going to start. And I think Clay Holmes ain't so bad. It's kind of funny to me. You think of Clay Holmes, the sinker baller, as a reliever. Sinker ballers are not supposed to go 6 shutout. Okay? They're supposed to go like 6 with like 2 earned runs. Right? But if you're a reliever, you are propped up to then make sure that you get all your outs in one inning and you don't allow any runs. And a guy like Clay Holmes works best over the course of a game. Oh, he has that one inning where all the BABIP got to him. Then he makes it up in the other innings. Mm-hmm. And he also has 2 secondaries that work. And then it gets over 20% swing strike rates in his sweeper and his gyro slider. Like, this is a starter profile. Right. So I am not surprised at all that they're actually trying to make this shift. And I think it works considering the Mets do not have a stellar rotation. I'm sorry, Mets fans. I love Francisco Lindor. I think Soto is going to be great there too. I'm actually such a huge Mark Vientos fan, and I'm going to be drafting him everywhere this year. But you need a better pitching staff.
Nick Pollock just listed off 3 hitters in a row on a team.
In a row.
In a row.
You don't even need to sign P. Alonso, okay?
Crazy. It's crazy. For me, Griffin Jax is the clear distant third, and I think that's because he becomes the closer in Minnesota. Minnesota needs to cut payroll. They've been talking about it all offseason. Can they trade Carlos Correa? Can they get anybody to take Christian Vasquez's $8 million salary? Can they trade this? Can they trade that? There are a lot of Johan Duran trade rumors. He is in the final year before arbitration. He's making $1.7 million this year. It will jump up to about 3.7 next year, and then it will jump up to about $7 million in his final season before becoming a free agent. I think it's all but set in stone. The Twins are not going to be able to re-sign him. This is all that stuff with Bally Sports and all of the issues they have with their payroll right now. Like, the Twins are not going to be able to sign him in 2 years. So the question is just basically, when do they trade him? To me, it's not a matter of if they trade him, it's when do they trade him? Do they want to trade him with 2 years of control left? Do they want to trade him with 1 year of control left, or whatever? I think, as you talked about, there are a lot of starters in Minnesota. You've got Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober, who are locked in. You've got Simeon Woods Richardson. You've got David Festa. You've got Zebby Matthews. You've got young, intriguing starting pitchers who maybe they don't all hit. Louis Varlin didn't quite hit, whatever. But you've got names that could fill out the final 2 spots in the rotation without having to make Griffin Jax a starter, because I feel like everything I'm reading from the Twins beat writers is I don't think Johan Duran is there for a long time. And you have to find his replacement. To me, Griffin Jax makes sense. But who knows?
It's possible.
And then I agree with you. I wrote up Clay Matthews over at NBC Sports.
Oh my gosh, you just did oh no, Eric.
Oh,
Eric,
did I say Clay Matthews? Sorry, that's a football thing. But also,
football.
I was saying Zebby. But also, I said Zebby.
Podcast.
Let's not say that. I said
Zebby
Zebby
Clay
Matthews.
Holmes. I know.
Zebby Matthews, Clay Holmes.
I know.
So it wasn't football.
How dare you?
It was an amalgam. It was an amalgam of baseball pitcher names. But I wrote up. I wrote up Clay Holmes over at NBC Sports, so I encourage you to check that out. There, when he was a starter, he used to throw a changeup. It wasn't particularly good. That's why he didn't need it as a reliever. But maybe the Mets, can get that back. We know the Mets love cutters. Clay Holmes with a cutter would make some sense. So there are some tweaks that can make Clay Holmes a decent starter. And so for me, for 2025, I think Clay Holmes has the best chance. And no, I don't think any of these guys comes close to what Michael King did. I don't think any of them becomes like oh my God, this guy is like one of the 2 best starters on my fantasy team. But I think Clay Holmes has the best chance.
The Adobe. Clay Holmes.
There are some guys in this final group who maybe could be one of the 2 best starters on your fantasy team. A lot needs to break right, but we're talking about late round, young pitchers, sky high upside. 4 guys we're going to throw in this comparison. We've got Kumar Rocker going pick 302 for the Texas Rangers. We've got Jackson Jobe going pick 325 for the Detroit Tigers. We got David Festa, 356 for the Minnesota Twins, and Bubba Chandler, 357 for the Pittsburgh Pirates. My answer here is Jackson Jobe, but I'm curious what your answer is.
It's Jackson Jobe.
Okay.
The other one, there are a lot of young guys.
I also we should include Uncle Ted did throw out this name of a pitcher that we all really like. We didn't include Noah Schultz in this because as of right now, Noah Schultz is going
he's like close to this
650. So Noah Schultz was not in the late round draft guys. He's going pick 650. But yes, Noah Schultz is somebody that Nick and I both love, and if we feel like he's going to get a shot for sure.
You can also include Jack Leiter in this mix. You can include Zebby Matthews. The correct name, Zebby Matthews, in a mix as well. Andrew Painter won't be here until June at the earliest, is what
you could probably include Quinn Matthews of the Cardinals. He's going pick 586 he might get an opportunity pretty early on, depending on what they do in
Brandon
St. Louis.
Sproat, but
Sproat.
okay.
James
But
Shiano,
really,
big Brandon Sproat.
yeah, no surprise there.
Yeah.
But really, let's just talk about this quickly. So Kumar Rocker looked really good four-seamer slider. It impressed me, the command of it that he had in his debut and the end of his last year, early in his career. And I could see myself circling him if he has an SP5 situation. Like, there's your fun Jared Jones-esque kind of guy right there. Jackson Jobe looks like the most complete pitcher. Again, it's always about how the rotations play out. They might still see him in the relief core. I doubt that. But I am intrigued by Jackson Jobe. It was a 4-pitch mix. We saw it very minimized in relief. I'm ready to just kind of throw away all of that relief stuff. And yeah, this is an overpowering fastball with multiple secondaries at work. Bubba Chandler, I would need to look more into, but what I saw and understood, his fastball wasn't as impressive as I wanted it to be, and it's more about the other stuff. But because of that, I generally like to lean mostly into four-seamer focus. And if the prospect's coming up and doesn't have amazing four-seamer, I have trepidation at first. But it's just harder for that to really work out. It's a lower chance thing, but I could be wrong about that one. I'm ready to look more into that one when I get to the Pirates and my team breakdown. And David Festa just didn't have good command. And it was really, really annoying. He has a 3-pitch mix that should work, four-seamer, changeup, slider, but it was very inefficient. And I get a little worried about that because unlike someone like Spencer Schwellenbach, who everyone has accepted, he was able to throw strikes. And unlike him, David Festa wasn't. He was able to execute as he wanted quickly. And I don't know when that's going to show up. I generally like to throw away command the first year, but I don't know. I'm still a little worried. I feel like it's going to be closer to the hipster side of he does well once and then he doesn't the next time. And I won't really know from that one. It's not as overpowering, just amazing as it is someone like Jackson Jobe. And there is one other guy I do have to mention, Sean Burke. Just got to do it. I don't really draft him because it's the White Sox. You're not really going to get wins, but he does have a really good fastball and then a slider and a curveball. And I liked what I saw at the end of the year last year. And there is a chance it's better. It's kind of a meme at this point for me, but I'm still intrigued by Sean Burke. And look, he's not going to lose starts over there. Like, he's going to start.
Yes.
I think he's their ace right now. Right?
Yeah. Depending on, yes, I guess it depends on, if yes. As it's currently constructed, they have some really good pitching prospects. I guess it depends on if Drew Thorpe makes the opening day rotation, or
Drew Thorpe is worse than Sean Burke.
If you consider Jonathan Cannon their ace, I think it's Drew Burke.
Oh,
it's
man,
Bryce,
so
it's Bryce,
you guys know
Bryce
right
Wilson.
now.
Bryce Wilson.
The rotation for the Chicago White Sox right now without Noah Schultz, because Noah Schultz, if he does come up, I know we mentioned him briefly there, but yeah, he's legit. He's absurd extension. Hard throwing, good secondary stuff. The second Schultz shows up, you want him. I like him as much as Jobe, if not more. Honestly, if you told me Noah Schultz was starting the year, I'm like, I think it's Noah Schultz. But Jonathan Cannon, Davis Martin, Sean Burke, Bryce Wilson, Drew Thorpe are the 5 according to Roster Resource for the Chicago White Sox. And guys that are in the waiting, they have Jake Eater, who I've not been impressed by.
No,
Nick Mastrini, who I think has the yips, and it's annoying because he's a really good slider and a four-seamer that profiles well, but he just can't throw it in the zone anywhere. Welcome Gonzalez, which they got on the Crochet deal, which I don't think was good, but
no, he has regressed for Boston over the last couple of years. He flashed in 2023. He looked pretty good in. He did not. It's funny. He didn't look good in high A. They moved him anyway because he was striking out tons of guys, and he looked pretty good in double A. And then 2024 was back at double A and regressed in basically every way.
What we're going to see though is,
Jairo Iriarte. I agree.
Yes.
I like Jairo Iriarte, and so you have Schultz. I don't think you're going to see Hagen Smith in the majors next year, but listen, crazier things have happened.
Yep.
So you've got Drew Thorpe and you've got Iriarte and you've got Noah Schultz, who to me feel locked into the rotation in the second half of the year. Like, I think they'll all be in the rotation from like July on.
Yeah.
And then it is, Burke and Cannon and, who stays
Davis
in there
Martin.
basically. Yeah. Holding the place of, Hagen Smith and maybe Wilkeman Gonzalez,
keep
or
in mind,
maybe
guys,
Jake Eater or whoever.
Iriarte and Nastrini, Eater, Gonzalez, and Bush are all in the 40-man. Schultz is not, and neither is Hagen Smith. Juan, oh no, it's too small for me to read this. This is what I have it very small because I'm stupid. His name is Juan Carrera, is also in the 40-man. So you might see those guys before the others, just because they would have to remove someone to get the other guys up there.
Yeah. Though it's not like the White Sox have guys on the 40-man they could get rid of, but yes.
Yeah, this is very true.
And yeah, so to me, like, I will say also, who was it? It was Isaac mentioned on YouTube Hayden Birdsong. I know you and I are both not huge Hayden Birdsong fans, just because of like the command issues and stuff. So I wouldn't put Hayden Birdsong personally in this tier. But for me, it's like Jackson Jobe. For me, I put on a Paul Skeens timeline. I'm not saying he's going to do what Paul Skeens did, but it would not surprise me if the Tigers kept him down for the first couple months of the season, tried to like limit his innings a little bit, didn't like have him full go at the start of the year, and then called Jobe up and then let Jobe just kind of like run from June on in the rotation. If you look at it, like the Tigers right now only have two guys locked into their starting rotation. It's Skubal and Olsen. And the reason I say that is because the other guys projected to start in the rotation, Alex Cobb, never locked into a rotation because never healthy.
You can't ever really lock in Alex Cobb.
Casey Mize certainly has not pitched well enough to be locked into that rotation.
Yeah.
You've got Kenta Maeda in long relief, who lost his rotation spot last year, so you can't really guarantee anything from him. You've got Sawyer Gibson Long, who's going to be coming back from internal brace surgery. You have no idea what you're getting from him. You've got Matt Manning, who I was excited about coming into last year and just totally regressed and looked really bad at AAA, got pounded by left-handed hitters. Like, there's some real issues there. You've got Kiter Montero, who flashed at times to be a usable starter, like flashed being in a rotation, not like being a great starter. And then you've got guys who I think are bullpen guys now, like Alex Faedo, Ty Madden. I still don't necessarily believe is a starter. I think Ty Madden is more of a reliever, and I don't believe that he's going to live up to, his prospect pedigree. And so, like, none of those guys should hold off Jackson Jobe. The question is just whether they hold off Jackson Jobe for a couple of months at the start of the year.
Yeah, well, I mean, you forgot about Brant Herter, who
but I
could be that guy.
And I really like Brant Herter, but I feel like they showed us their hand that they don't necessarily want to treat him as a full-time starting pitcher.
Yeah, we'll see. Also, the other element is, are they going to sign someone else? They've been trying to.
Listen, we've got a lot of
that's likely what happens, and then you have a situation of Jobe fighting, say, Casey Mize, or maybe not, because Alex Cobb is going to go up the stairs and all of a sudden hurt his knee again.
That's where it's like, okay, Alex Cobb wins the starting rotation job. When Alex Cobb gets hurt, Jackson Jobe is called up, and all of a sudden you have a seamless transition.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think Alex Cobb is interesting to start the year. You just know you're not going to get a lot out of him. And I think they could sign somebody else, but I feel like they have a weird affinity for like Mize and Manning. And I don't know that they want to fully give up on Maeda because of all the money they're giving him like immediately. I think they would love one of those guys to actually win a rotation spot. But
yeah, no, absolutely.
That's all speculation.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, Jackson Jobe to me feels like, I'm with you completely. He should be in that rotation. And that is a guy with overpowering stuff. And I'm excited to see that trained as a starting pitcher, out of camp as a starting pitcher, in that flow, as opposed to the relief kind of mentality. Had to shift gears and be something different kind of in the moment. Yeah. And with all the spotlight on him and being like, that's such a ridiculous thing. What is it about guys named J.O.B. in Cleveland, in relief in the playoffs? I don't know. It's wild. But I think that's all the mid-round targets here.
It is.
We got today, Eric.
It is. We got through a bunch today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. We are going to continue to discuss starting pitchers until, again, February 11th, when we are going to get Nick's top 1,200 starting pitchers that we are going to go over on the podcast. I think you've claimed you're going to do 400. We'll see where you
Yeah,
actually end
it's
up.
gonna be 400 again, I'm sure.
401, 412, for
Yeah,
whenever
you
he can finish. But yeah, we're going to go over those. We got a lot of topics coming up through February 11th, and then we'll kick off those rankings there. As always, when you download the podcast, rate, review, you can leave comments on what you'd like to see. You can follow us on Twitter, tell us what you'd like us to discuss. We'll get you that content as we get through February, and we'll be back next week for another episode of On the Corner. I'm Eric Smolsky, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollock, the Lion.
And I gotta go wash my mouth out with soap for mentioning an NFL player on this podcast.